Radio. The opinions expressed on this radio station, its programs, and its website by the hosts, guests, and call-in listeners or chatters are solely the opinions of the original source who expressed them. They do not necessarily represent the opinions of Revolution Radio and FreedomSlips.com, its staff, or affiliates. You're listening to Revolution Radio, FreedomSlips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
Hello and welcome back to David Maggie's Training Setup. Show number 607. Seven and 600. Wonderful. Donate if you can. If you can't, tell people about it. Any kind of currency is good, including crypto. So please do. It'll keep the station going. And a big shout out to the chat room. It's quite active there. Hello, everyone in there. Now. Yes, this is the second hour, and we're going to go into the connecting the dots. The hypothesis, which is still alive and well, and I'm still looking at insights, epiphanies, and I want to use the algorithm, maybe in a slightly modified form, because it has served us well. We went on the record with saying a few things, and much to my dismay, those things proved to be true. Mm-hmm. And I say dismay because I think it's a horrible, horrible thing. That
it didn't eventuate the way it should have.
Yeah, unfortunately, but we expected that. We said something will happen to prevent it, and it did. Mm-hmm. I didn't realize the Aboriginals had something planned for the same year. Again, so what that means today, most critically, is that there is much more meaning to the Fibonacci sequence than maybe we give it credit for. Yeah. It seems to be an underlying fundamental principle of the expression of life and maybe everything in our reality, if you will. And more so a fundamental answer. Rather than 42, the answer is in fact 0, 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, and so forth, which is the Fibonacci sequence. Not a number, but a sequence of numbers. I wonder if that is not in fact the truth, right? The answer to life, universe, and the rest is the Fibonacci sequence, not 42. Unless, of course, you like 42 and stay with what you're comfortable with. I don't want to shake your belief system to its core. Of course, that's what I want to do. No. We discussed a whole bunch of stuff. We discussed the fact that we seem to have a kill switch. We are the second or third Adamic race, it seems, that has come about. Probably more, but that's what we know. I can only talk about what we know, right? There are myths and legends about other things. The Maya talk about the fourth world we're in right now. Hindus talk about many, many worlds before this one. The Egyptians said there were many floods before the flood that we, or the Greeks, remembered. So this catastrophism, the idea that catastrophe governs life and civilizations on this planet, seems to have some merit. And not just in legend, but rather in our very genetic makeup. You know, how do you explain the number of our chromosomes compared to our ape cousins?
We have 46, and our cousins that we were meant to have come from had 48.
Yeah, and there's no good. And I urge you to do your own research. Go and read the literature, and don't just Google search it. Just go to the library. Mm-hmm. Just go to the library, or buy the books. I mean, I do. I buy the books. And it's interesting. So that's there's a whole bunch of stuff. Then you got the mitochondrial Eve. Okay, you've got the Y chromosomal Adam. And the whole bunch of X chromosomal, Y chromosomal. Anyway, so you've got a whole bunch of things that are pointing to bottlenecks in our genetic line, dating back hundreds of thousands of years, maybe longer. We've got tool down events. We see massively big and massively unnecessary constructions of things.
Yes.
where we, this is really the thing, Dave, right? When we discuss this, you look at these constructions and you go, okay, look, I get why they build it, but why did they build it like that?
Mm-hmm.
We wouldn't build it like that today.
No.
Could we? Well, you know what? I think we'd be hard pressed to do it because it's just so hard and expensive. It's really hard to do. It's hard to cut big rocks, number one,
Mm-hmm.
because the bigger. Okay, this is all about structural integrity. Okay, that's an engineering term. It means a structure in and of itself having enough stability not to collapse or crack or otherwise damage itself under its own weight.
That's right.
That's why at the moment we haven't got a space elevator. We haven't got a space elevator because we haven't got a material that is strong enough not to collapse under its own weight
Mm-hmm.
as it reaches the height that a space elevator needs. Now we're getting these materials now, the whole nanotubes and other things. So the materials are getting there. We eventually we'll have a space elevator.
Graphene looks like hopeful.
Oh, completely agree. In fact, I think I mentioned this a couple of years ago, before COVID, in fact. This was before COVID. I went to Canberra as part of my job. We spoke to the government, and one of the chief government scientists had dinner with us. And it was some contract we negotiated.
Awesome.
And we just started talking. And he's actually his specialty is gravitational waves. That's what his thing is, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's his bucket. Gravitational waves. So, this is fascinating. So we started talking, right? And he must have, I guess, seen a kindred spirit and whatnot. And eventually we started talking about the space elevator. I said, what is your take? I asked him on this. I'm fascinated. Do you think that we're close enough now? I'm looking at all these new materials that we have, and graphene was one of them.
Yep.
And nanotubes. So he goes to me, Mackie, by the end of the decade, we'll have a space elevator. I said, really? He goes, well, I think so. I go, wow. This is a guy. This is an insider, right? I mean, this guy's not just a scientist; he's also a governmental insider. Anyway, just an aside here. So you look at these massive stone blocks, and these weigh 1,000 tons. 1,000 tons of stone.
Yep.
Nobody today would be stupid enough, and I mean stupid enough to try and do that. First of all, you have to quarry it. That's number one, quarry. So you have to find bedrock that is structurally sound.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of micro fissures, no mini cracks, nothing like that, right?
That's right.
Because once you start in on it, right, and
That's
halfway through it, that's a commitment because you spend money doing it, right? A lot of money. And maybe money, Dave, and I'm thinking that's probably true. Maybe money wasn't a thing for some of these civilizations. It just wasn't. They had different goals. I mean, our civilization, unfortunately, is driven almost entirely by the greed motive. That's it. With greed, that's what we have. Civilization X, that's what we are. But what distinguishes us from every other civilization, we're driven by greed. We're all a bunch of greedy bastards and other such things.
Minimum cost, maximum profit.
100%, and we see it every day in the jobs that we do, Dave, don't we? That's the truth. So, but you commit yourself. So you start digging out that big rock, and you look at the Sphinx as well. The Sphinx is carved out of one piece of rock, right? It has been repaired with bricks, and that's what you probably see. But it was carved out of one solid piece of rock. The entire foundation of the pyramid is one big piece of rock, bedrock. That's where it sits on. That's why it hasn't subsided, because it sits on bedrock. Anyway, look, the Inca walls, you see these monolithic structures everywhere. And the question, of course, is, why? Well, not how, because it was done somehow. But the question is, why would you do it? Even if you could do it. And we could do it today with difficulty, but we could do it. But nobody would. And we see the tools done it because we see half finished and even three-quarter finished stones, if you will, still there in the quarry. So they never were taken out entirely. Other tools done events we see elsewhere. We also see massive destruction in Pumapunku. Massive destruction. It looks like somebody kicked over a Lego board.
That's right.
And I mean this. I say this advisedly because the Pumapunku stones themselves fit together like Lego.
Yeah.
I mean, they used clamps, metal clamps. We think bronze, maybe gold. We don't know, right? But some metal that essentially bound the stones together. We do it today. We still do it today. But they were poured in situ. What does that mean?
That means they had a furnace.
A portable furnace. that could pour the liquid metal, whatever it is, I don't care. You have to be hot, right?
Yeah.
So you have to, not to have a portable furnace, you have to have a means to keep it hot.
That's right.
And never mind OH&S.
Well, remember, when we discovered the bellows, because a regular fire can't make it hot enough.
Yes.
And so you need bellows to accelerate the heat and make it hotter than it possibly could be.
And all of this, and then what we also find is we find the megalithic yard that has been dealt with in other books by other researchers ad nauseum. Really great work. If anybody has the time to read up on it, please do. It's research on the megalithic yard. Megalithic yard. See what you find there. It also goes into the Celtic cross, which is not a cross at all, but rather a surveying tool. But that's neither here nor there. Point is this: there seems to have been a unit of measure in use across the planet.
That's
now you think, so
right.
what?
Yep.
So what? But we don't have that today, everybody.
No.
Okay. In fact, we had failure of several projects because one project site calculated in inches, the other in centimeters.
That's right.
And what?
That was a Mars mission that had the wrong unit of measure, right?
And never the twain shall meet. But it looks like as though all these structures around the world were worked with similar tools. That's important.
At the same similar time.
They were worked with the same units of measurement.
Yep.
And that is, I mean, again, in today's world, while it seems that the metric system is winning out, it hasn't yet. And it's only a fairly recent development, if you will, over the last couple of 100 years, that the metric system became so dominant, if you will.
Yeah.
In the 18th century, and by the way, any kind of measurement, all measurements are connected. Volume, weight, and area, if you will, as well as length. They're all connected together. In the 18th century, to go from Hamburg in the north of Germany to Munich in the south of Germany, you would pass probably 40 or 50 countries, German countries, principalities, dukedoms, etc. And whatever goods you were transporting would change in weight 40 or 50 times, and you would pay different taxes depending on the weight that was calculated in that particular principality. Even then, there was no commonality of measures. The only commonality of
I was just actively listening.
The only commonality of measurement that we have, and this is going to sound really, really insane, but it's true, is 2 horses' asses. So if you look at our railway gauge, okay, and you look at the size of the space shuttle and tunnel sizes, etc., you have to retro-engineer it. Okay, so from the railroad gauge, it's actually the roads and so forth, and then you're at the beginning of it when the Romans started building roads all over Europe, and there's a lot of them are still around because the Romans were really great engineers. Their concrete, due to the addition of lime and other volcanic rocks, is a lot better than our concrete, for example, and it's a lot better in maritime environments. It doesn't erode like ours does. Anyway, but the Romans built these roads, and they had carts. And the carts were a certain size because they had 2 horses. That's just what the Romans did. 2 horses would draw a cart. That's how most carts were configured. Not 1 horse, not 3, but 2. And the width of the 2 horses, and the widest width of a horse it's behind, determined the width of the axle of the cart. Right? It just did. And then that would determine the placement of the wheels. And that in turn determines the ruts these wheels would leave in the road. And that in turn determined everything else going forward, including our space shuttle, the dimensions thereof, because the space shuttle had to fit through certain tunnels that had its space unit measured as 2 horses' asses. Okay, so I find this endlessly fascinating. But my point is this: to have a unified measurement across the planet speaks of an extremely highly sophisticated civilization. Highly sophisticated. With global reach.
Global reach, Mackie. So we're talking about a measurement system that was the same, a communication system that it was the same, a design system that it was the same. They had machinery that was the same.
Yeah, incredible
stuff.
The
tools that were the same. And you know what? That just doesn't sound like the history we were taught.
Not even close. You're 100% correct. And you have to ask yourself, look, if Dave and Mackie know this stuff, and look, it's not us. There's so many researchers that went before us that are contemporaries to us. I mean, Brian Forster, he's a phenomenal researcher.
For one, shoulders, that's right.
Oh, completely. And so many more. So I mean, we could spend the entire show just talking about just mentioning names of researchers out in the world. And look, we try to mention them as often as we can, and so to encourage you to buy their books or watch the documentaries. But the point is this: the knowledge is there, and it takes you though to go out there and get it, because none of this stuff, virtually none of the stuff that we discuss here in the show, we learned in school. You have to go outside. You have to go to outside literature. You have to go to outside sources, outside the school curriculum, in order to learn. Because the school curriculum only has one purpose: to educate. No, it's not to educate. It's to teach everybody to read and write and do arithmetic. That is true. That is true. Everybody has to be able to read, write, and do arithmetic. But that's only necessary because they have to become useful members of society.
That's right.
What's a useful member of society?
Fill a role inside a company.
That's exactly right. That's the thing. That's really all education does for you, unless you're lucky and you go to maybe a grammar school in Europe, like I did, where the humanities are emphasized, and you do learn a bit more, still not a lot, but a bit more, or you go to a private school, where your trajectory is in fact not to become necessarily a cog in the system, but rather a leader, a manager, a director, whatever. That's your trajectory, right? And in Germany, it's very clear that there are three types of school after you do primary school. Right, one track will send you into most likely a trade kind of life. You can be a tradesman. There's nothing wrong with that, by the way. Another type of schooling will send you into the middle bracket of jobs, like office work, etc. Right, up to a certain management level. And the third track of schooling, a grammar school, as a gymnasium, as it were, that prepares you for university. Not everybody goes to university necessarily, but it is the higher education track that you're on at that point.
Yeah.
You can throughout your school career, you can switch between the schools as you might develop certain proclivities or abilities or desires or ambitions as you get older. But that's what it is, Dave, and you said it 100% correct. It is to make you be able to work in the machine. That's it. Just anything else. In fact, I come back to The Simpsons. When Lisa says something, and then I think Skinner hits the button, independent thought aloud.
That's right.
And Dave has experience. Dave, why don't you tell us what happened to you?
I did engineering science, and I used to ride a bicycle to school, which had tough wheels, if you know what toughs were. It was chromoly frame. There was alloy everywhere you could put it to lighten it. And so here I am. Oh, I had Shimano everything on it. This thing was a Quicksilver frame.
Oh, nice.
It was probably about
Mr. Moneybags.
Yeah, Mr. Moneybags. It was probably about $800 worth of individual components that I'd put together over a period of time, which superseded my previous bike, which was a steel frame with a center spring and shocks on the front handlebars. Like my Quicksilver was a BMX for racing, right? Everything was lightened. I drilled out most of the components anyway, not the frame because that was golden. Anyway, you could pick it up with just a couple of fingers. It was really nice, right? Anyway, so here I am. I'm in engineering science, and the textbook says bicycle. And he goes, now I want everyone to design a bicycle. And I did. And then he goes, so what has everyone made the bicycle out of? And I said what mine was made of. And he goes, no, you see in the textbook it says steel frame, right? And rubber tires. It's steel and rubber. And I go, well, no. And so I found out that our book, our textbook, I think it was 45, reprinted in 1945. Reprinted. Right? So surely, in all the time that those reprints had existed for, there would have been enough federal money to include modern materials in bicycles. And plus, they only had a 10-speed bicycle pictured, and I said, I'll bring my bike in and we can discuss it. No, it's not. No, so you're going to be tested on this. And that's where I quit. I didn't quit school. I quit learning engineering science because they were teaching something that had changed 40 years prior.
That's the thing, though.
Yeah?
There's a saying in German.
Ridiculous.
It is completely ridiculous. The saying in German is this: unter den Talaren der Muff von 1000 Jahren. What that means is, under the robes of academia, there's the smell and dank fog of 1,000 years. So, what it essentially means is that academia doesn't really. Academia doesn't really have a desire to push the boundaries, established academia. If you're a young Turk, like a go-getter, and you want to make a name for yourself, that's really, really hard unless you got the sponsorship, the agreement, and you stay within the guidelines or the guardrails, right, of what is permissible. And many, and we've discussed this. This is part of obviously the show cycle. We discussed many scientists that didn't do that, and promptly found themselves out of a career, right? which is unfortunate.
Mickey, it's been 40 years. I hope that they've made at least my bike in there, and they wouldn't have carbon fiber mentioned at all.
Yeah,
it's too soon.
Too soon. Carbon what now? We got radio now. hey.
Oh, that's hilarious.
No, it is quite disturbing that nobody would push hard. And you're right. This what happened to you is typical.
Just a good example.
It's brilliant.
And it's typical of that lockstep sciencey thing and education that they don't really they don't consider anything new at all. The learning or the education system is so rigid and inflexible that
no. They've the learning. I'm learning. I'm sorry.
Right? Now, let's put it this way. So, big corporate approaches the government and says, okay, we need to fix the people who are coming into the roles straight out of high school because, wow, aren't they missing something, right? And they go, well, what do you recommend? Oh, we've provided you with a 400-page, it's easy reading. These are improvements to the school. You really need to make this in the education system. So when they come out, we can just employ them straight away. No training whatsoever. Now, that happened twice. So in America, in California, when I was there in the 80s, there was a typing pool. You learnt to type. And it was exactly at the crossover of computing where we had a whole room full of mainframe computers that was part of the California University of Fullerton, right? Had a pipe to our business, like a multiplexer, and it went to all the K-12 schools. So each school had a bunch of terminals, which was really cool. I won't tell you what I did on here. That was really cool. But at the same time, this overlap of having a typing course where it was touch typing, just read and type, and you got marked on your accuracy and speed. And the other one was the computers just coming in, and the people who did computers could type rather well. without the typing course. Like today, I'm in a meeting and I'll just start typing on my keyboard, Mickey, and I'll look to the person to the left of me or the right and just have a chat part of the meeting, and I'll continue typing. And then I look back and then I smile because I've typed it correctly without looking.
Mm-hmm.
We can do it, although we choose kind of not to. We still do the visual cues, make sure we're doing it correctly. But anyway, so I thought that was really interesting. So they had a typing pool and the computers were coming in at the same time. And I don't know how long it was before that typing pool thing was deleted. Because in big business at the same time, there was a floor of people who were copying stuff. You know, you might have seen it like World War II. There was, around that era, there's a whole room of 100 ladies there, each with a typewriter in front. And they were given something to copy. So the first person copies it, hands it to the next person, and then they keep doing that until the whole of them are making copies, typing out copies of that letter. Yes. And then the photocopier came in.
Yes.
How could a business, Becky, operate with 100 people in a typing pool back then? It just sounds insane, doesn't it, to have that many people on the P&L, right? Then to just hire a photocopy that did the same job.
Yeah.
Oh, hang on. No, that was the time when the companies started to shift in their CEO role wages, right, to the front line. I'll shut up.
God! But look, suffice it to say, though, that there is overwhelming physical evidence for a number one, catastrophe.
Yep.
And number two, a civilization that predated the catastrophe. In fact, in my opinion, many civilizations of high acclaim and high achievement, similar to ours, different to us, might be different. Right?
Different, yes.
But nonetheless, as accomplished, if not more accomplished in certain areas. So that's the physical bit. And I think we've I mean, when I say physical, I'm talking about the biological evidence within our genes and other things we discussed. I'm talking about the ruins. I'm talking about really odd objects and strange technology. I mean, there's just so much, right? Physical evidence. And then legends is mythology as well.
That's right.
Right? And then, of course,
there's a good segue.
Yeah, I know, right? And also, the tech that we've come across, and maybe the ancient tech that was exploited by the Nazis potentially and still is by others today. But, right, that's the physical bit. So what does it all mean? Our discussion of non-physical phenomena shows a mountain of evidence supporting the notion that we're not merely flesh robots or biological automatons. Now, why is this important? Because in the hypothesis, we want to know everything. We want to have an explanation for everything. That's really the fundamental aim. Maybe a new cosmology, if you want to call it that. And in order to do that, we have to understand that, yes, there is the physical world, which we've discussed at length, but there's also the non-physical. I don't want to call it spiritual or metaphysical or whatever, just non-physical, because that's easier. Okay, we don't put any value judgment, any coloring on it. It's just the non-physical stuff, the stuff that we can't cut up there, the stuff we can't really measure, really, the stuff where the scientific method sort of fails because it's just not that kind of phenomenon, right? And we spent a lot of time discussing this, and this is important because we believe there's more to us than just the physical makeup that like our bodies. Well, again, I don't want to speak for Dave, but I believe that I am fundamentally not my body, but rather I am the entity that is riding my body through this particular reality matrix, right? And in fact, only a small portion of that particular entity, because I can't remember a whole bunch of stuff.
Oh, that's true.
Right? That's really critical to understand as well, because we spoke about a whole bunch of things. We probably take these now, Dave, and let's take them in turn. If you want to go ahead, my friend.
Ghosts. This was from shows 36 and 37. I remember when we used to do
holy.
short show cycles. You know, the ghosts themselves are in all cultures. And, you know, we all realize, not all of us within the cultures, but all the cultures themselves have representation for them. One thing that is coming up, I think it's, when is it? 2 days' time for us, and that is Halloween. Mexico is like Day of the Dead. The Day of the Dead is celebrated around the world at the same time, pretty much, right? And these are supposedly unconnected cultures that have a long history of celebrating it. And we also worship ancestors. And you have to consider what that means. So I know that I've had my own ghost experience many times, and I can't explain it any other way other than it is real.
Yeah.
That's it. I actually had to ask them to leave if they weren't currently an ancestor of mine in any way, shape, or form. You know, I had to move them on because I said I couldn't hear them and I couldn't see them, but I knew that they were there. And they sat on the bed, and I thought it was my wife coming home from work. And it moved the bed, but it wasn't. There was no one there. But there was a depression of the person being there, and it's like, wow, that's good on you. But I've had some other experiences, but that was the one that said to me that they are able to exhibit something into our reality. And oh, by the way, the English TV series of Ghosts, which is actually pretty funny, it's a comedy. Kylie Minogue starred in an episode of that.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, it was only for a special occasion. It wasn't part of the series, but everyone was there, and she could see the ghosts as well.
Okay.
So that was really fun. So what's the next one, Mickey?
The next one is poltergeist phenomena, and there are scores of documented cases also in show 36. Now, speaking of documentation, these days, because there's so many cameras everywhere, we actually have video evidence. So we no longer have to rely on people telling us their experiences. We have video evidence of things that you look at. It's a video, right? And yes, you can say, oh, no, it's a hoax, but then you get video specialists saying, well, it really isn't. Whatever was there, it actually filmed what was there. Right. So we now have evidence for these things.
Yeah.
Similar to Dave. Go on.
I said, yeah.
Oh, sorry. Similar to Dave, I myself had some experiences in this space, but my mother had scores of experiences. And again, my mother has no reason to not tell me the truth, all right? So whatever she told me, she believed happened to her. Mm-hmm. Therefore, in my mind, because she didn't have any problems with mental faculties or whatever. I mean, maybe that's the curse of my family. Our bodies might fail, but our minds stay sharp. That's sort of the curse.
So Mickey, my mother also had those same tales of ghosts.
See, but again, this is probably what Dave and I are connected in some ways as well, because this kind of stuff. When I say stuff, it's these things, these unusual things seem to run through our families. And you know what, Dave? I don't think they're all that unusual.
Mm-hmm.
It's just that people don't talk about it.
Yeah, that's true.
People just don't talk about it. But what's next, though, Dave?
ESP. Now, the poltergeist phenomenon that Mickey raised is interesting because ESP and the many forms of ESP and telekinesis, etc., could describe a poltergeist phenomena, but we'll get into that. So the work of Hal Puthoff for the CIA and similar Russian projects associated with remote viewing and also remote killing, believe it or not. Mm-hmm. And Uri Geller was identified as the most accurate remote viewer. registered with the CIA through Project Montauk.
It's funny how we only remember him for spoon bending.
I know, that was part of the ridicule, to silence him. He still has a website with a spoon in it, and if you can bend it with your mind, he'll give you $1 million.
It's pretty neat.
It's really a thing.
And which brings me to deja vu, which is probably one of my favorite subjects when it comes to the non-physical phenomena. Which speaks to non-linearity and also time fractures. And I've experienced powerful deja vus, as most of you have. But I've said this many times in other shows as well. Mm-hmm. I actually experienced a deja vu, and then I went against it.
Wow!
So
rebel.
I was there in the situation. It was something very trivial. I was there in the situation. I had the deja vu experience. And then I didn't do what my deja vu told me I should do.
Crazy.
And I told Dave, and I think I told you guys here as well, that when I did that, and it was something very trivial, like taking a plate out of the cupboard or whatever. Yeah, super trivial, trivial. It did. Those of you that have a record player at home, like an analog record, know when the needle jumps tracks, right? That's right. You know that sound, the feeling that you get. That's what it felt like.
Make you jump rails.
It was like, it really was a very strange kind of feeling, I'll be honest with you. But I do remember this so vividly. So, because deja vu is also seen as your neurons misfiring and giving you the wrong impression. Yeah, that's science, right? So now, my experience stands in direct contrast to that, because I didn't do.
That's right.
What the deja vu said, and I had a very profound track change experience at that point. Now people will say, that's just...
So like Mickey's feet were somehow magnetically attracted to this reality and then jumped across to the other one that was kind of intersecting at the time. And that's the way we've tried to describe it, because deja vu comes with a pre-feeling of the experience. You get an eerie sense immediately. Like, wow, something's this weird, right? And it's usually part of a couple of seconds in advance of what's really going on in the situation.
Correct.
And then when it happens, you've got enough time to tell the person sitting next to you, wow, I'm getting deja vu. Yeah. This person's, because you've just seen it, and the person entered this room, in my case, sitting at a party, sitting next to someone, and I said, wow, this person's going to say blah, blah, blah. And then they just said blah, 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 right? Whatever it was. And they went from one door to another, and it was, wow. And then the feeling subsided again.
Yes.
So if there was a way of being able to describe when two realities are intersect and where a choice can be made, right? Or what have you, I don't know what it is. And I'm trying to explain it with the words that I've got. And it's the only way that we could come up with it, because deja vu is having seen.
Correct. That's correct.
Yeah, that's what the direct French translation is.
And at that point, I think back to this often, and then my experiences when I feel like I've become unhinged again, and maybe slipped, and it has happened a number of times.
Slipping, Mickey.
No, look, but I wonder if that was the first, or not the first time, but maybe that was the time when I became seriously unhinged, and a bit more loosely or less firmly connected to any anchoring reality. Because like there were many instances where Dave told me something about himself, which would have come up in our conversation. It just would have. But it was news to me. It was completely new information to me. The nosebleeds that Dave suffers from, congenital, like I do, like my daughter does, or not anymore. She's better now.
And like my daughter,
like my father
too,
did. Yeah, and maybe my father before him. Who knows? But it's congenital. It's a very large vessel in the nose that's causing it for us, inside the nostril. That is. Or other things that have happened as well, right? To Dave, and every time it seems to get worse for Dave.
Stop slipping. Every time Mackie seems to have a slip, I end up injuring myself somehow.
Yeah, that's not. completely unintentional. I assure you.
That's what he says.
That's what he said. Sure.
I think he's talking to you. Hello, Mr. Sampson.
He's got a contract out on me. No, you're funny. No, but look, I know what this sounds like. I know. I do. I'm.
I do question all of the things that we've mentioned, but in some cases where I've got my direct experience with it, I don't need to question it anymore.
That's the thing, right?
But I still don't know how it happens and why it happens, and what is it we're really seeing.
That's the thing.
Because I don't know.
And ultimately, see, my mother asked herself all the time, because she had many more experiences of this nature than I ever did. But she kept saying to me, "Who am I? Wer bin ich eigentlich?" in German. Wer bin ich? Who am I then?
Wow.
Having all these experiences and seeing all these things. And she saw this guy. This was in Crow's Nest, and she was on Willoughby Road, and just down from Five Ways. And across the road was a gentleman she knew from the German newspaper she worked at.
Oh.
And he just stood there looking at her, and she waved, but he just stood there looking at her, right? And then she turned around and he was gone, and she didn't think much of it. Then she read the German newspaper some days later, and in it was his obituary.
Oh, wow.
Except, of course, he had passed away before she saw him.
Yes.
In Crow's Nest. You see? And other, and I won't mention it, but much more frightening examples. I'll give you one more. We were in Singapore. Yeah, perfect. And this was before Sentosa had been developed into this massive hotel amusement park thing, and Sentosa was probably a bit more provincial in Singapore. Sorry, Sentosa is the island of Singapore, which has a whole bunch of amusement opportunities. And this was like back in I want to say the late 90s. And I was there with my mother and my friend Jason. I think it was for my good friend Phil's wedding. And we were there just and this was a big amphitheater. This is an amphitheater where they had the laser show. Right? So every night there would be a laser show and it would be quite spectacular. But this was during the day and there was nobody there. It's just my mom sitting there. And while Jason and I were just walking up and down a bit around the amphitheater, just having a bit of a wander, right? So she's by herself. There's no one in her vicinity. And we come back and then she goes to me, "This is what happened. Someone touched me on the shoulder just now." And then you go, "Okay, well, but there's no one here." She goes, "Yeah, I know there's no one here. That's what I'm telling you, right? Yeah. Otherwise, what's the point of telling you?" So it is things like that. But Dave, what is your example?
Oh, I've got to remember. That's right. So we took my mum to hospital. This was on the day she died, and my dad has a house which is a split level house. It's basically 3 stories. Like there's 2 immediately on top of each other, one on top of each other, and 1 to the side. So it's a half floor if you for all intents and purposes, with half staircases to it, and it's a whole floor of its own. And so I'm in one part of the house. My dad has now gone to another part of the house, and there was nothing more we could do, and they were just waiting the clock out. Right, we'd said our goodbyes, and Mum was slipping, so we left, and there's nothing more we could do. Right, so we've gone home. They're going to just go home. So I heard my mother call my name in the house. My father heard her call him from the common area in the house where we both weren't. And to our surprise, we were so alarmed to hear it. We went to the same position in the house. And he goes, "Did you hear that?" I go, "Oh, I was going to say that." And he goes, "Yeah, Mum just called my name." She goes, "Yeah, she called my name too." I've had a friend of mine who passed away through his own endeavours. Let's say it was he made a go-kart and was driving it around an industrial estate on the concrete apron around the huge warehouses, giving it a test drive. And he'd made a supercart. Let's not beat around the bush here. This thing would do 100 kilometers an hour or more. Right? It was absolutely, it would just fang around. And he did lose control on the bumpiness of the apron, and he careened into something which made him die immediately. And on that very moment, I only learned later on, like a month later, when I discovered his time of death. At a reunion, a school reunion, we all recounted his name, Stephen Highfield it was, his name, and on the same day he came to visit us all. He gave us a parting memory of him that we could all remember. Just extraordinary. That doesn't happen. Normal people don't talk about this. Yeah? Quiet little pockets here and there, I'm sure, right? But if you're a listener to the show and you've had the same kind of experience, simply type in yes, and where this is on YouTube, type yes into the comments, because I'd really like to know whether you did or not. So eerie. And by the way, my high school is now less than half of the form that I was in, the year, there's already less than half, through all kinds of manner of, death styles or causes, right? So it's we have reunions now just to count who's left.
Nice.
Yeah, it's crazy. But anyway, Becky, reincarnation has more evidence to prove that it's true. Now, in the West, we've had to take that proof on angrily. We didn't want to know it was real. We didn't want to believe that it was true. But the East has believed it for centuries, if not longer, thousands of years. So there's some tremendous examples of young children, and I'll give one. Young children who one of them was in World War II as a fighter pilot, and he'd gone missing or was shut down, and he was able to recount up until about the age of 4 or 5, which historically, in all accounts around the world of people remembering their past life, is the extent to which you remember it. You don't tend to remember it more than the age of 4 or 5. Until then, you're a wealth of knowledge. You can recall everything, right? If you've got the ability. So, and you're not dismissed by your parents. But initially, they were just curious because he kept saying his name and rank and serial number, right? And what squadron he was in, who his co-pilot was, or his bombardier or whatever, the carrier he left, and the mission title. He knew all of those things, which weren't discoverable in a single location, and in fact required many research events to be undertaken to be able to piece the whole story together to validate it. In fact, it was real. Another one in England, which was a house that backed onto the railway line, and the child was killed by the train, and on the way home, the new child, 30 years later or 40 years later, was driving the car. They said, "Turn left and let's go to my old house." And they go, "That's a bit weird." Okay, well, we'll do that. And they turn up out the front. Yeah, that's where I used to live. But I was a boy then, and my dog got stuck on the railway line, and I went to try and help it, and the train came, and that was the end of me, right? And they found in the census, because of all the countries in the world, England's actually got a pretty good record. They found the birth record of the child by the name that was described by the child, by the kid. The census, the years, because I think they're every 3 years or 4 years. So in the gap between the two census where the child disappears, they found the death notice, and they also found the cause of death, and that the child didn't exist after that. It's crazy. Just crazy, Becky.
It is, if you consider everything we've been taught about reality, everything we were given as a foundation of our existence, which now, especially if you listen to Plato's Cave as well, you must realize it is severely flawed. and in fact falsified on purpose. The best time for any overlord, any parasite to rule is when the vast population or the vast number of the population is completely ignorant. That's the best time. That's gold, right? As soon as people gain knowledge, and I think that's why we have the story of Prometheus and the the Garden of Eden, all that stuff, right? Lucifer, mind you, bearer of light is what Lucifer means. Bearer of light, just like Prometheus. Anyway, that's a whole different story. As soon as you get knowledge that, oh, geez, now we got to do something else. We got to somehow control them. Otherwise, we have to, find other mechanisms of control, because ultimately, there aren't that many parasites, and human beings, through their own endeavor, will get smarter and become more knowledgeable, and they will endeavor to educate themselves, and further it goes, right? And that's, of course, in direct opposition to what the parasites want. So here we are. All of these things we're discussing are completely contrary to what you have been taught to believe. Now, funnily enough, reincarnation, as Dave has just pointed out, it has got some phenomenal, even scientific evidence to it. Now, it has to be treated slightly differently because obviously it's a non-physical phenomenon. But most cultures in the world believe in reincarnation, including early Christianity, believe it or not, including the Cathars, who called themselves good Christians before they were all killed by the then emergent Catholic Church. Yeah. That brings us, of course, to dreams. And this is really important stuff.
With 4 minutes
left. Really, really important stuff. I'll be able to finish dreams. Not a problem. Then we'll go to the telephone zone next week. Now, what are dreams? They have no... In fact, sleep in and of itself is completely pointless from an evolutionary point of view. Why sleep? What's the point of sleeping? There's no good point. No, that's when our brain, puts away all the data and recalibrates and integrates all of that stuff. Okay, yeah. I dig it. Fair enough. But then dreaming. What's dreaming? Why would you dream? Oh, okay, well, because that's just getting your brain doing stuff. Well, I disagree. Some of it, I'm sure it is. But the key thing here is this to understand. Without sleep and the attendant, in fact, sleep in and of itself is not going to do anything for you. You can sleep 50 hours if you want. Well, not 50 hours a day, but you can sleep for as long as you like. Unless you fall into REM sleep, the whole experience is completely pointless. And REM sleep, if it's called rapid eye movement, is when you dream. That's when you dream. Okay. So sleep without dreams is not refreshing. Sleep without dreams is not restorative. Okay. Yeah. So why is that? Don't know. We'll get to it in a second. There was a study done in Japan, in fact, which is really interesting. Sleep duration, association of sleep duration with mortality from cardiovascular disease and other causes for Japanese men and women. Both short and long sleep duration were associated with increased mortality from cardiovascular disease, non-cardiovascular disease, non-cancer, and all causes for both sexes, yielding a U-shaped relationship with total mortality with a nadir at 7 hours of sleep. Now, what does this mean? At 7 to 8 hours of sleep, you have the least mortality as a regular thing. So if you regularly sleep 7 to 8 hours, that's when you have the least mortality associated with it.
Wow.
With it. 3, 4, 5 hours of sleep, mortality is high. But 9 or 10 hours of sleep also has fairly high mortality. So for us, it seems 7 to 8 hours. And this is for adults. Children and babies are different.
Sweet spot.
Yeah. Correct. Babies, children, completely different. Babies need like 12, 15 hours of sleep. Young children, 12 hours as well. Just to be clear. My cat needs
20 hours.
That's absolutely true. Now, sleep, I submit here, is where our spirit, our real self, is allowed to walk the yard in the prison. So I postulate here that we are in prison. The prison is our body. It's the skull that we're in. It is this reality. There's no actually escape from it anywhere. You can't go anywhere to escape it in this reality because you're within it. You're in the game. You're in the matrix. You can only escape internally, maybe through the pineal gland, maybe through other methods, But sleep is where you're allowed to roam free in the real world. And that's why I think it's so important. And that's why you will die if you don't have it.
And there's the music.
Oh, yes!
Wow, perfectly timed once again. Stay tuned for Jerbears, or Gerbears.
No, Jerbear.
Jerbears. After our show coming up next. If you're listening to this on YouTube, do write comments in there. I will reply to each one. And, until Tuesday and Thursday of next week, where we'll say good morning to you in Kentucky or Eastern 7 a.m. You'll catch us again, same time, same channel, next week. Until then, take care, everyone. And be safe. That's all you want.